Israel is on its way to a decision in Gaza as Hamas hints that it might be ready to wave the white flag, changing tactics and exposing its own distress as the full plan to defeat Hamas is revealed. This is happening for many reasons. Amongst them is a change of tone coming from Washington as Israel is demanding the release of all of the hostages at once, and the disarming of Hamas and the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is endorsing these demands, but Hamas has dismissed this, declaring that we will disarm once there is a Palestinian state whose capital is Jerusalem instead of Israel. Meanwhile, Hamas fears that a rescue of the hostages is on its way, who have been moved to tunnels underground, significantly worsening their captivity conditions. We know this because on Saturday, Hamas released a horrifying, unimaginable video showing captive Evyatar David in terrible physical condition, described by some as a living skeleton buried alive. United States President Donald Trump reportedly watched the Hamas video and immediately instructed Netanyahu that it's time for revenge, as Witkoff returned from a fact-finding trip to Gaza and told the crowd that was gathered for the weekly protest at the Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, "I wish I had news. Hamas is not keeping its word." In a related story, the Qatari figures behind the Hamas propaganda machine have been exposed. We'll tell you more about that. And meanwhile, on Israel's northern arena, Lebanon's government will discuss disarming Hezbollah, which threatens a boycott, while Iran is preparing for another round of war with Israel despite its massive domestic unrest, economic ruin, and international isolation. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what is happening in Israel. IDF Givati Brigade soldiers have scored a major strategic victory in the northern part of the Gaza Strip by capturing a major tunnel network that they've been searching for over 18 months. The intelligence echelon estimates that this could be a mortal blow to the Hamas terrorist organization and its operations in the area and bring the fighting there to an end within a week. However, Hamas has long fought guerrilla style and now uses a new tactic that's aimed at the commanders and at disrupting maneuvering forces, while political leaders are postponing a decision on the continuing of this war. This situation is made even more complicated by the decision by Hamas to release shocking videos of hostages being held in dungeon-like conditions. And against the backdrop of Hamas's latest video, advanced talks have begun between Israel and the United States to present Hamas with an ultimatum that includes demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, releasing all the hostages, dismantling Hamas's rule, and establishing a temporary United States-led administration in Gaza. If Hamas refuses, Israel will launch a new military operation to defeat it. The gruesome video shows captive Evyatar David in horrific conditions, described as a living skeleton that was buried alive. However, this video of Evyatar David and Rom Breslavsky are far from the center of most global media coverage of the Gaza war. Many major news sites choose to downplay the captives' horrors, while others did not mention them at all. However, United States President Donald Trump watched the Hamas videos and reportedly had a very difficult time with them. American officials are now saying that after the deal, the United States will work to utterly destroy Hamas. And meanwhile, Hamas responded to reports that United States Envoy Steve Witkoff told hostage families the group had agreed to disarm by declaring that the resistance and its weapons are a legitimate national right as long as the occupation continues. And amidst all of these developments, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will explain why Hamas was in complete shock from the bombshell dropped on the organization at the fateful meeting with Qatar and Turkey. At the United Nations conference in New York, these two countries were among dozens of governments from the Middle East and Europe calling on Hamas to end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority. Mati will bring you all the details about this issue and about Witkoff's tense meetings with the families of the remaining hostages in Gaza. Meanwhile, in Iran, senior regime official Ali Larijani, which is a close advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is set to become head of the Supreme National Security Council. Larijani is a hardliner of the hardliners, and his appointment increases the likelihood that Israel will need to prepare for yet another round of hostilities. Iran should be looking for ways to solve its own internal problems and not go looking for trouble outside, but this regime doesn't see things this way. And closer to home, Israelis are looking north to our neighbors in Lebanon, wondering if the internationally recognized government will move to disarm Hezbollah as is being demanded by the United States, France, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. Hezbollah is threatening a boycott of these discussions, but next Tuesday the cabinet is expected to discuss asserting state control over all Lebanon and exclusive state possession of weapons. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Mati Shoshani, and this is Boots on the Ground, the report that brings you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 667 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, we need you to help us spread the truth. Israel needs us to stand together and share what's happening here. So guys, if you like our content, if you want us to create more content like this one, please click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned in real time and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, let's begin with the latest reports out of the Gaza Strip. The IDF fighters succeeded in laying hands on Hamas's strategic tunnel in the northern part of the Gaza Strip over the weekend after 18 months of searching for it. A few weeks ago, soldiers from the Givati Brigade and the combat engineering succeeded in locating a tunnel in which there were computers and documents. Intelligence specialists examined these materials and realized that they have found the key to what the security establishment had been seeking for a very long time. It amounted to a map of the tunnel that starts near Gaza City, continues to Jabalia, and from there to Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia. On Thursday evening, after sweeping the tunnel and finding large stockpiles of weapons, ammunition, equipment, and a great deal of additional intelligence information, the tunnel was demolished together with its entire 1.5-kilometer length. Although many such tunnel demolitions have occurred over the last 22 months of fighting in the Gaza Strip, this one was unique for a few different reasons. This tunnel crossed the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, parallel to the Tancher route, also known as Road 4, which cuts the Gaza Strip from the Erez crossing to the Rafah crossing. And at several points in the north, the tunnel branches out, allowing passage east to west as well. The tunnel was built so that under every house of a senior Hamas battalion officer in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there is a shaft connecting the house or its immediate surroundings to the tunnel, enabling terrorists to move freely from place to place inside Beit Hanun and throughout the northern sector. This is why Hamas's military force in general, and Beit Hanun in particular, managed to survive despite the 5 times that the IDF raided this area, maneuvered in, and captured parts of this town. Now, they've lost their access to all of these underground routes, and this will severely hamper their ability to continue operating. This is not the only larger success that the Givati Brigade has in this war. They have been actively taking part in Operation Gideon's Chariots for 73 days, and during that time, they are confirmed to have demolished 657 buildings above ground and at least 50 major tunnel shafts and many smaller branches below the ground, while eliminating over 200 terrorists in face-to-face battles. Givati also paid a steep price for all these successes, including 4 fatalities and 59 wounded, many of them seriously. The IDF is pleased with this latest tunnel demolition, which is seen as a tactical achievement that has strategic significance. One Givati officer summarized the achievement by saying that we seized the main tunnel, cut them off so that they can no longer bring in supplies and logistics for ammunition, explosives, and even fighters. We forced them to operate above the ground, which gave us an opportunity to attack them from the air and ambushes. In a related story, the IDF spokesperson released unusual footage on Saturday of Hamas terrorists surrendering to Givati fighters who have been operating for nearly a month in Beit Hanun in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The terrorists told of a weapons storehouse near the shaft and led the forces to that location. A large quantity of weapons was seized, including vests, magazines, fragmentation grenades, and firearms. The tunnel also contained gear for prolonged occupation, including food, water, and hygiene supplies. The IDF issued a statement saying that the terrorists were transferred to security interrogation. The weapons were confiscated, and the tunnel is now under examination by the engineering forces that are operating in the area. The maneuvering forces under the Southern Command continue to locate and destroy terror infrastructures and terrorists, and to collect vital intelligence for the forces' activities. Zooming out a bit and looking at the big picture here, Operation Gideon's Chariots has in fact ended. Of Hamas's 5 military brigades, the IDF has defeated 3 designated as targets by the political echelon: the Rafah Brigade, the Khan Yunis Brigade, and the Northern Brigade. The army now faces the 2 brigades remaining in Gaza City and the central camps, where it is feared that Israeli hostages, alive and dead, are being held, and according to the estimates, some 1 million civilians are in Gaza City and more than 500,000 more in the camps. And speaking of hostages, once again the successes of the IDF has had on the battlefield comes with a price, and this time it includes a decision by Hamas to move the hostages to tunnels underground for fear that they would be rescued by the IDF, which has significantly worsened their captivity conditions in recent months. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to support the truth about these issues, and as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, leaving a comment, leaving a like, and hitting the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, there's another subject that I want to speak to you briefly, and that's the tremendous stress this situation is placing on Israeli society, families, and individuals. Many Israelis are still juggling reserve duty in the IDF while trying to get back to their works, to their families, to their day-to-day lives in the midst of all these rapid changing dynamics. It's not easy. Your body is tired, your mind's overloaded, and the pressure doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. I've been there, coming home from reserve duty, trying to be present for my family, catching up at work while still feeling like I'm in a survival mode. It takes strength, energy, and faith to push through. That's why I started using Vinya during my military service. It's an Israeli supplement made for red grape cells that helps improve the blood flow to your heart, your brain, and your muscles. For me, that meant better focus, more energy, and fewer days of that foggy, burnt-out feeling. So I started using it during my reserve duty, and I'm still using it today. There's also a coffee version and also a tea version, but everything works. So try it for yourself. Guys, if you want to give it a try, go to vinyatbnisrael.com. Again, that's vinyatbnisrael.com or call 800-638-1944. 800-638-1944. So faith helped me stay grounded, and Vinya gave me the energy I needed. Now, back to the news about the recent developments regarding Israel's remaining hostages that are being held in the Gaza Strip. Over the past weekend, United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was in Israel and went to see the situation in the Gaza Strip firsthand, accompanied by the United States Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Hamas responded to the visit by publishing horrifying videos of 24-year-old Evyatar David abducted by terrorists from the Nova Music Festival party and held in the Gaza ever since. His family was especially shocked by the videos describing him as a walking skeleton, and Hamas was quick to declare that the reason he was in this state is because he eats what we eat and drinks what we drink. However, there was evidence, even within the video, that this is simply not the case. A terrorist whose face cannot be seen in the video hands Evyatar a food can, and his arm and hand, which appeared clearly in the video, are full and fleshy, in stark contrast to Evyatar's severely malnourished body. Analysts were quick to point out this horrifying discrepancy in Hamas narrative. But we'll have to see if this has any impact around the world on the people. In any case, the video continues with Evyatar holding up a can of food that he just received and telling the camera that it is meant to last him 2 days. He also describes the unusual menu that he's giving, including lentils and beans, but he adds that there are many days when he eats nothing at all. In addition, Tal Shoam and Omer Wankert, former hostages who were held with Evyatar and his friend Guy Gilboa Dalal in this tunnel, stated firmly that the terrorists holding them had plenty of food. Shoam said, "It's the same tunnel where I was held with Guy and Evyatar. Just a few meters away is an iron door, and behind it sit Hamas terrorists, several gunmen who eat in abundance. Meat, vegetables, fish, and fruit. They have everything that they need, and they stole it all from the humanitarian aid that is meant for the Palestinian people of Gaza." Shoam added, "This is deliberate starvation by Hamas commanders meant solely for propaganda and in a truly sadistic way. Evyatar has lost more than 40 or even 50 kilograms of his body weight. He is in an extreme life-threatening condition. I don't think that he has even a few days left to live if they don't give him supplies and food immediately. When I was released, Evyatar already suffered from extreme scurvy, a severe vitamin C deficiency, a disease unheard of in the West for 200 years. This is according to the former Israeli hostage." And meanwhile, Hamas responded sharply on Saturday to the statements by President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who expressed hope for a comprehensive deal to return all the remaining living hostages. In a statement, Hamas rejected remarks attributed to Witkoff's suggestion that Hamas might be open to disarming and clarified holding weapons is a national and legal right as long as the occupation persists. We will not relinquish the principle of resistance and the holdings of arms until Palestinians' full national rights are restored, foremost the Palestinian state whose capital is Jerusalem. The message constitutes an open scorn for the envoy's declarations, which presented his mission as a significant step towards stopping the fighting and returning the hostages. However, Hamas did not stop at a political rebuttal. It also attacked Witkoff's visit to the humanitarian aid fund facilities that are operating in Gaza. The group said Witkoff's visit is nothing but a carefully staged show aimed slowly at deceiving world public opinion, beautifying Israel's image, and providing diplomatic cover for the starvation and killing policy in Gaza. This is according to Hamas. Guys, this is a terror organization that spreads only evil, killing on both sides Israelis and Palestinians alike. It is an extremist Islamic terror group bent on destroying the state of Israel at any price. Hamas has almost no support in the Arab world, and yet somehow it has become very popular in Western countries. It's hard to believe and impossible to ignore. On that note, I want to hand things over to my friend, TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst, Mati Shoshani, for an in-depth look at what unfolded this past weekend since Steve Witkoff delegation reached Israel, how President Trump reacted to the shocking hostage videos that Hamas released, and which way the wind is blowing in the Middle East right now. But before we continue, keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, let's hear from Mati Shoshani about Hamas's release of the horror video and the reaction of the United States President Donald Trump, who watched the footage, grew extremely angry at Hamas, and promised revenge. In addition, Witkoff announced during his visit to Israel yesterday, we're changing course in the negotiations. One all-in-one deal or nothing. In these tense meetings with hostage families, Witkoff said he came to the region to see the situation in Gaza firsthand. Despite visiting aid centers and president's statements that he saw hungry children, Witkoff claimed that there is no starvation. According to him, we know which hostages are alive and will find those responsible if they don't come out alive. Mati, can you organize for us the entire diplomatic weekend and give us an update?
Thank you, Yair. Over the weekend, a horrific video circulates. It's a video of Hamas captive, or Israeli Hamas captive, Evyatar David, a young man who's been held in captivity for almost 2 years. He appears on camera. This was released by Hamas to torment and torture the family and himself. He appears on camera emaciated, weak. He looks like he's starved to the brink of death. And the Hamas terrorist hands him food, making a whole show of, this is the food you're going to get. Now, mind you, the hand of the Hamas terrorist that's feeding him is a well-fed hand. Evyatar David was clearly, undeniably, starved intentionally by Hamas. And in this video, Evyatar is told to dig his own grave. I know this is heavy, I know this is dark, but this is the reality we're living in. We're living in a reality right now where the global media is making an enormous show of this false claim of Israel starving the people of Gaza. And then in reality, we're seeing that the people that are being starved are Israeli captives being held in Hamas captivity. And they've been held for hundreds and hundreds of days. We're pushing towards the 2-year marker on that. Hamas has been intentionally starving them, intentionally hurting them, intentionally murdering many of these people. That's the reality we're living in. And we're living in a bizarre situation where the global media and this woke culture, this, well, you name the agenda however you want to name it. Let's call it a false agenda. They're making a huge outcry over what they're perceiving as a food shortage in the Gaza Strip, and it's a complicated topic that I'm not going to touch on right now. We've talked about it extensively. And yet you hear a resounding silence from the majority of those voices over the intentional starvation of Israeli captives, civilians who are innocent in most cases, or all cases they're innocent, most of the cases they're civilians, who are held in captivity of Hamas. That's the reality we're living in. That is the enemy that we're fighting against which. And I've walked through this weekend with a very, very heavy feeling of just incredible anger at the undeniable hypocrisy of the people who are willing to scream and chant and hate in the streets against Israel, but they're not willing to say a single thing in the benefit of the hostages held in Hamas captivity. Now let me tell you something, not everyone is silent. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, immediately when this video is released, 1, he approaches the families to try and console them. 2, speaks very strongly about how much we need to release these people, how evil Hamas is and the terrorism that we face in their hands. You know who else spoke on this topic? US President Donald Trump, who reportedly was shocked by the video that he watched. And his words were, we need to, as soon as possible, exchange hostages and then take retribution or vengeance against the vile Hamas terrorists. The report says that President Trump was deeply, deeply impacted by this. But I'm telling you all this dramatic information, not for the sense of sadness or to bring down anyone's spirit, although we should be saddened by these images. The reason is because we're facing an unprecedented wave of hypocrisy and duplicit values in the world. At the same time as Hamas terrorists are holding Israeli innocent hostages underground, intentionally starving them, intentionally murdering them, intentionally maiming them, torturing and tormenting the families of those hostages in Israel. At that very same time, there's a slander campaign going on against the state of Israel that is time and time again claiming false statements against the people of Israel, claiming the Israeli government is intentionally starving the people of Gaza, which is a proven lie, using images of children that were starving in Yemen 5 or 6 years ago as images of those who are starving in the Gaza Strip, using images of Gazans who suffer from genetic disorders as images of those who are suffering in the Gaza Strip, and the list goes on and on and on. At the same time as we see Evyatar David starving to death in Hamas captivity, we see images of, well, there's no better word than to say, overweight Hamas terrorists flaunting the food that they received from Israel in terrorism tunnels. That's the reality on the ground. That is the reality we're facing and we're fighting against as we deal with this incredible evil, which is Hamas. In the backdrop of all of this, the ongoing false campaign against Israel is being used for one other thing. It's being used to try and weaken Israel's image in diplomatic circles, specifically by initiatives by the French government and several other governments that are calling for a unilateral declaration or recognition of a Palestinian state. Now let me connect these dots because it doesn't really make much sense, so I'll try to connect the dots for you. So on the one hand, you have Hamas Gaza, a elected government by the people of Gaza, and by the way, by most of the people of Judea and Samaria too, that is set up many, many years ago. We're talking about 2006, voted by the people, has controlled the Gaza Strip since then. And then there's a weakened regime, which is very corrupt, very broken, very inefficient, called the Palestinian Authority. They control the Palestinian city centers or cities and major population areas in Judea and Samaria. And suddenly, all of a sudden, people are interested in the European, and I'll just say this openly, in the anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic circles or in other countries. Suddenly there's an interest in propping up once more a Palestinian state. This is the same people that failed to aid in the situation in Gaza. These are the same people that failed to make any kind of substantial effort to change the situation after the horrific events of October 7th. And suddenly their moral compass wakes up and they think that the solution to all the troubles of the Middle East goes through Ramallah, a incredibly elderly leader named Abu Mazen, who's the leader of the Palestinian Authority, and that will solve the situation in the Gaza Strip. Mark my words, there is no connection between what's happening and a desire for justice. All of this, in its entirety, is aimed at one singular thing: weakening and destroying the state of Israel, harming the Jewish people, whether they're in Israel or outside of it, and no connection whatsoever to a desire for justice or for relief for the people of Gaza or otherwise. Let me remind you guys that for months now, the people that are distributing aid inside the Gaza Strip mostly are the State of Israel through the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a U.S. nonprofit. The UN, UNRWA, many other organizations have done everything in their hand to prevent Israel from bringing aid to the people in Gaza. Yes, the same organizations who are tasked, whose entire existence is based on the fact that they will bring aid to people in a time of war, suddenly they're uncomfortable bringing aid because it's political, because Israel is involved, because it will present Israel in a favorable light. They'll do anything to weaken the image of Israel and anything that will harm the situation of the Palestinians on the ground because they don't care about them. Remember those two images. The images of Evyatar David, who's starving to death in Hamas terrorism tunnels, faced with the people that are inflicting that on him. Overweight, fed, well-equipped Hamas terrorists who are bragging in the tunnels over how good their situation is. And the world looks at this, and the response from many, not all, but the response from many is, Israel is to blame. Do you see the disconnect in that? Israelis are dying to death or starving to death in Hamas tunnels. Hamas is doing well. Again, the Gaza Strip conflict has been a violent one, as are conflicts, but Hamas is still doing well. There's clearly not the signs of starvation that people are trying to prop up and create this false image of. And Israel is to blame for that situation. Now, don't get me wrong, Israel isn't imperfect, and this war has been a prolonged war. And yes, there's substantial and real suffering on the ground in the Gaza Strip, but the people that inflicted that suffering and brought that suffering upon the heads of the people of Gaza is Hamas, not Israel. Israel is responding to the events of October 7th, 2023, not the one instigating the violence against the people of Gaza. Bear that in mind. So where do we go from here? Well, it's a really tricky situation that everyone is in, from the people of Gaza through the hostages in the tunnels, and of course Israel and the U.S. So in a very short time, Minister Ron Dermer, Israeli Minister Ron Dermer, along with our National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi, are supposed to meet with the Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington. And they're meeting to try and figure out what comes next for this hostage situation and the ongoing conflict in the Gaza Strip. And there's a really big problem here because of the disconnect that exists. Let me explain. Israel wants a ceasefire, the US wants a ceasefire, and what we want to do is exchange hostages for a ceasefire. But Hamas doesn't want a ceasefire, and they don't want to give back the hostages, and they don't want to end the war. And they've made that very clear with their actions, not with their words. In every single negotiation, there never is anything substantial that comes from their side. And in every time there's been a discussion of a ceasefire leading to a hostage exchange, Hamas has blatantly, openly, repeatedly violated the agreements between them and Israel because their goal is clear. Their goal is publicly stated. Their goal is known. They desire to bring death and destruction. They don't care about the people of Gaza. They don't care about the hostages. They're not interested in an end to this conflict. And that also puts the US in a very tricky situation because the US has repeatedly said what they're wanting is an end for the conflict in the Gaza Strip because everything that comes next, be it Abraham Accords, the Saudis, bringing an end to the Iranians, the deal, all of that folds underneath the situation or resolving the situation with Gaza. Israel can't move on before we get our hostages back, and we can't end the war before we get the hostages back. Hamas knows that, and they are trying actively to lengthen, to prolong this war almost indefinitely. Because once again, their statute, their main agenda always has been and will continue to be death and destruction for their people and for the people of Israel. And we're really in a very problematic situation. Israel wants the hostages back. The Israeli public was outraged over the images we saw over this weekend of the starved Israeli hostage, and we've seen similar images in the past. We know that they are dying away in Hamas terror tunnels. We know that it is happening. We want to deal as soon as possible, and yet we're dealing with a evil, which is Hamas, that wants anything but to end the conflict. And on top of that, we're dealing with much of the international community and much of the global press that have been waiting for an opportunity to once again go back to the anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli rhetoric, where Israel is to blame for every trouble in this world. And it is bizarre, it is corrupted, it is skewed in so many different ways that it's almost not worthwhile addressing, and yet we have to spread the truth. And I think this is where you, the viewer, comes in. If you're watching this right now, the only place we can go from here is just be more and more determined, double down on spreading the truth about what's truly happening here, because there are so many people out there that want to spread lies, so many people out there that want to create a false narrative, so many people out there that want to distort the reality that people are living in, and we need you to spread the truth. So make sure you like, you share, and you subscribe. You help get to more people with the truth of what's happening here on the ground in Israel. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani, for bringing the light of truth in this very confusing situation. Israel is fighting an information war, and right now, lies and distortions about Israel are spreading around the world. To combat this, stand with Israel against the lies. Help support the truth by sharing our content with as many people as possible. And be sure to like, leave a comment, and hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, after Mati told us about some of the diplomatic fallout from these videos, I want to zoom in and tell you about the reaction of these videos amongst ordinary Israelis. The horror videos of hostages Evyatar David and Rom Breslavsky shocked Israelis over the weekend and once again illustrated the unimaginable cruelty of their captors in the Gaza Strip. But many Israelis were also shocked and horrified to discover that international media outlets gave very modest coverage to these videos and in some cases ignored them entirely. Major news outlets worldwide prefer to focus on the suffering of the Gazan civilian population, further proof of Israel's poor standing in international public opinion. For example, the leading headline on the BBC website, long known for its critical tone towards Israel, dealt with Hamas's refusal to lay down arms until a Palestinian state is established. For several hours after the hostage video was released, the BBC said absolutely nothing about it. The main headline on Britain's Guardian newspaper, which is another outlet critical of Israel, covered allegations of war crimes in Gaza, claims that, according to the report, usually end without indictments. The hostage horror videos did not appear on the homepage, unlike stories about alleged starvation amongst Gaza's population and claims of fatalities from the IDF fire. The report of those 18 fatalities was also highlighted on Sky News site, noting that some casualties were Palestinians trying to get food. That was the main headline, while on the right side of the page appeared a photo of the gunned Evyatar David from Hamas's first horrifying video this weekend. CNN's main headline dealt with the idea of establishing a Palestinian state. Below the top line were other Gaza war stories. Last on the list was an article titled "Families of Israeli Hostages Stage Emergency Rally After Gaza Gunmen Post Captive Videos." To their credit, CNN noted that in videos posted by Hamas and Islamic Jihad, defined as extremist organizations, Evyatar David and Rom Breslavsky appeared in very fragile condition. However, alongside outlets that downplayed the horrors, others highlighted Evyatar David's story. Germany's Bild news portal prominently wrote that Hamas forced 24-year-old Evyatar David to dig his own grave and called them barbarians, adding that terrorists exploit an Israeli hostage for their propaganda in the Gaza Strip. Britain's Sun news portal featured the horrifying clip of David digging his grave, the second Hamas video that was published under the headline "Sick Bullies." Hamas vows neither to drop its weapons unless demands are met, as thugs release video of captive forces that are forcing them to dig their own grave. Another tabloid, the Daily Mail, ran Hamas's first video with the caption, "Hamas releases horrifying video of Israeli hostage who looks like a concentration camp victim after 666 days in captivity." Now, we can take some encouragement from the fact that some news outlets gave a truthful, or at least somewhat balanced view of what's going on in the Gaza Strip. But then we remember that these days, because the internet algorithms show people that they're most likely to be interested in, so it's very likely that many people will see or hear of any of these stories or commentary that's expressing criticism of Hamas or sympathy for Israel. That's why, guys, we need your help to get a truthful account of what's happening in Israel. So guys, please leave a comment, like this video, and subscribe to this YouTube channel to help us reach as many people as possible and never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we're continuing with the news about all the existential threats that Israel and the Jewish people face, and we're switching our focus to the northern arena. In Lebanon, tension is peaking ahead of Tuesday's cabinet meeting, which is slated to discuss handing over Hezbollah's weapons to the Lebanese state. For now, Hezbollah and Beirut's leadership do not seem to agree on the best way to move forward, and after two forceful and contradictory speeches by Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem and Lebanese President Aoun, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam yesterday convened a government session to discuss state control over all of Lebanon and exclusive state ownership of the arms, which is widely understood to mean the disarming of Hezbollah. Although President Aoun has met with Hezbollah's parliamentary bloc leadership to discuss this issue, there is a threat by them as well as the other Shiite group in Lebanon, Amal, to boycott Tuesday's session. The big question now is whether this cabinet meeting will set for the first time a timetable for Hezbollah to surrender its weapons despite its opposition. That could lead to internal Lebanese confrontation, similar to events in May 2008 when the state moved against Hezbollah's influence. On that occasion, Hezbollah pushed back forcefully, but many things have changed since then, so maybe this time there will be a different result in this situation. And in a related story, over the weekend it was reported that Morgan Ortagus, the President Trump's former envoy to Lebanon, who had been removed, will be returning to her position. The status of Trump's Syria envoy Tom Barak, who took over the Lebanese file from her, is unclear, and Ortagus is considered tougher on Hezbollah than Barak. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on developments in Israel's northern arena, and we ask you to help us share this content by hitting the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. And the big question, guys, that everyone is asking this week is, are we facing a second round against the Revolutionary Guards Corps of Iran? Iran's political and social system faces major challenges, including tightening economic sanctions and financial erosion, as well as environmental concerns and growing public frustration. Reports point to a sharp drop in non-oil exports and its value, controversy over the cyberspace bill, a rise in executions, and harsher government rhetoric against Israel and against the United States. The Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs think tank published a report recently which presents the precise picture from Iranian media, from the reformist press to the establishment outlets. The report includes some statistics that indicate a sharp decline in productive economic activity. Customs reported non-oil trade at $34.175 billion in the first 4 months of the Persian year. Shipment volume rose, but overall the value fell at around 10%, showing continued production yet shrinking profits due to the global price drops and a weakened real, the currency of Iran. And meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry condemned new United States energy sanctions as a direct attack on national dignity, but this appeared to have a little effect in the real world as banking transfers are blocked and the real, the Iranian currency, passed 87,000 per $1 United States dollar in its value. While Iran's economy continues to decline, the water crisis in the country continues to escalate. A government report revealed dramatic drops in the water level that is being held in dams, while many wells, lakes, and rivers have simply dried up and disappeared. Meanwhile, Energy Minister Ali Larijani called for differential water allocation, met criticism over impracticality, while the phrase "water, not missiles" is trending on Iranian social media platforms, signaling rising anger against the regime. But despite attempts at internal censorships, the regime seems to have lost control, and opposition groups are increasingly emboldened to speak out. In response, Supreme Leader Khamenei's envoys in Friday's sermons stressed active resistance, opposition to Western democracy, and global condemnation of Israel. But even conservative pundits have warned that without effective explanation and transparency, unity may break and the public's anger at the regime might boil over. But it's important to remember that Iran's regime has received this warning many times in this past few years, and it has never changed course, so it's unlikely they will do so now. In fact, in the face of all of this, Iran's regime simply continues to double down on terror and violence against its own people. Rights groups speak of a massive increase in executions, averaging over 5 executions every day in Iran's vast network of prisons. Arrests and other forms of repression are also on the rise, with no end in sight. In foreign policy, the regime also continues on the same course that it has long maintained, leading to increased diplomatic isolation. Western sanctions are tightening, and even China and Russia are beginning to lose interest in defending Iran in international forums. In fact, Russia is actively competing with Iran in energy sales, and Turkey is competing with it for influence in Africa, and Saudi Arabia is increasingly critical. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on every development, and we invite you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. And most importantly, guys, remember, this is a spiritual war. And how do we fight a spiritual war? We pray. So guys, let's pray for the people of Israel, for the IDF soldiers, for the hostages to come back home, for their health. Let's pray for them to come back home healthy, alive. Let's unite in prayer for the peace of Jerusalem.